I'm going to tell you about my introduction to a Sand County Almanac. The title that was promoted was The Long Shadow of the Sand County Almanac. And part of learning my field was sort of absorbing from other professionals and people who I would look to as my mentors on how important the Sand County Almanac is to people in the field of wildlife biology. Leopold recognizes that the only way that we're going to really truly achieve conservation is if we change people's values, if we change the way that people look at non-human nature and the way they value it. And that becomes the basis really of the land ethic. In the field of wildlife ecology, we point to him and we call him the father of wildlife ecology. And we say, as a legacy of that, one of the important principles of wildlife ecology is that management policies should be based on science. The administration at the University of Wisconsin had put out the call among the faculty to do these MOOCs. MOOCs were, at the time, kind of a hot topic. Other universities were doing this, and it was seen as a way to raise the visibility of the university, the teaching, the research that goes on there. So, okay. Let me tell you about the biggest mistake we made doing the MOOC. Remember, the MOOC that's an acronym for Massive Open Online Course. So I said, we could do one with hunting because hunting's kind of popular in Wisconsin, and we could use that as a vehicle to talk about the land ethic. And then Paul Robbins went back and wrote a proposal, and he sent it in, and we became kind of the theme for the second round of MOOCs that the university was doing. And, this was exciting. This was exciting because this was something, hunting, Aldo Leopold, the land ethic, this was something that by the time I was a professor at University of Wisconsin, I believed in. I thought it was important. And I was eager to share that, and I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if this would be interesting beyond Wisconsin. Turns out it was. We had like over 1,000 participants in 100 different countries. And we had these discussion sections where you could ask questions and have discussions. And I remember the question that I got when I was moderating one of these things was, is the land ethic ethical? A thing is right when it preserves the beauty, integrity, and stability of the biotic community, and wrong when it tends otherwise. That's the statement of the land ethic, or sufficiently close to it. But the question that I got in one of the chat rooms, I wasn't prepared for. And do you see why this is a big mistake? We were doing a MOOC that was largely organized around an ethical principle, and we didn't have anybody on the team who knew anything about ethics. But there's this whole world of academic research into the philosophical field of ethics that we had completely neglected in doing a MOOC that was about a specific ethic. But his point was, if you adopt that point of view, eventually the interests of nature overtake the interests of human beings. It's called environmental fascism. This idea that eventually human interests become subordinate to the interests of non-human nature. And it turns out that this has been argued back and forth. There are people who are trained ethicists out there who have written ringing defenses of the land ethic against this idea of environmental fascism. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about what did he mean by beauty, integrity, and stability.
Could you describe the research you're doing on the apostles?
Right now, this is one of my favorite research efforts. We've been doing camera trapping in the Apostle Islands, and what we're finding is, on the bigger islands especially, we had the full complement of the native predators that you would find on the mainland, but we find we have reduced prey populations, and we're in the process of trying to estimate prey biomass, but on the basis of the raw data, it looks like the ecosystems on the islands are inverted. In other words, you have very high predator populations and high predator diversity, and you have relatively low numbers of prey, both in species and in absolute biomass. And that would be just backwards, according to, from what you would expect. And we think that, at least in terms of the carnivores, none of those islands are big enough by themselves to support populations over the long term. So the fact that they're out there and persistent means there's got to be some movement between islands and from the mainland out to the islands. And we think for most of those predators, that probably occurs over the ice. So we're trying to figure out this three-way relationship between the size of the island, the isolation of the island, and the amount of ice that connects them over time. And I think there's some really interesting biology going on there. So,
what is your take on CWD?
I hate CWD. CWD is probably the wildlife management problem that's the biggest right now. CWD is not behaving like other diseases that we're familiar with. We can't come up with a biological mechanism that's going to limit CWD. There's no immunity involved. The weak amount of genetic variation is not sufficient to think that there's going to be an evolutionary solution. In other words, that resistance is going to evolve fast enough to save the Wisconsin deer herd. This is an epidemic that is happening in slow motion, but it's just rolling over the deer population. We have prevalences west of Madison where the adult bucks, 1 in 4 of them is probably infected. And at some point, this is going to begin impacting the survival of adult deer to the point where the sustainable harvest is going to go down. In other words, the hunting opportunity available, even if you want to shoot deer and take the chance that one of them might be effective, the opportunity is going to begin declining. And there's been a lot of discussion about a proposal that's kind of well outside the box in terms of what's been tried before, but this has stymied biologists, and I think it is time to begin having the discussions about, okay, if we're really going to be creative, what can we do to get ahead of this disease? Because the alternative is it's going to come north, it's going to decimate the deer herds at some point. It might not be in my lifetime, but it's coming.